Hey, what's happening, everybody? Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading here, and I am honored to have a very special guest on a Sunday because this gentleman happens to be so damn busy that this is the only time he could fit me in. So, Paige, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity to tell us a little bit about your company and your story, which I find to be very compelling. So, Paige is the CEO. Paige Tucker is the CEO of Prostar. The symbol for that is MAPPF, currently traded on the OTCQB. I have a history in construction industry. So when I met with Paige the first time, and let me just share with you, Paige was very persistent in trying to get some time with me. We were both at a conference. I did not have time to meet with Paige, but he followed up with me on LinkedIn and said, look, give me 15 minutes. And that first meeting, I wound up talking to him for, I think, about an hour and a half. And I was wowed. And I think you're all going to be wowed as well. So, Paige, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about the amazing opportunity that lies ahead for Prostar?
Sure. And I appreciate it. And I don't mind coming in on a Sunday at all. You'll just have to excuse my attire. I'm usually dressed a little better than this, but I had yoga this morning, and then I always rush up to see my parents, and then right after that I came down for the meeting. So this is what you get today.
Listen, I'm fully aware that normally you're in a whole different attire, so I get it, and I appreciate it, man. I would have taken you anyway. It wouldn't have mattered.
No problem. Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. So this is actually my third startup. My first one I started in Silicon Valley. My background's always been in data management, and eventually I got involved in what's known as geographic information systems, which I always tell people, don't be intimidated by the word. It's actually a big fancy description of digital mapping. But I got involved in basically extrapolating data out of old mainframe computers in the automotive industry that they told me we couldn't get the information, out. And I always like hearing can't be done. I'm like, well, let's see if we can do it. So I actually designed a software program that would allow me to integrate into old mainframe computers, basically download all the customer data, including all the service customers and all the customers that purchase vehicles. And then implementing geographic information systems, I was able to map where all those customers were coming from and then start prioritizing zip codes where they had their highest level of penetration and also customer retention. Now, today, no big deal, but in the early 90s, that was somewhat revolutionary, where I could basically say, listen, this is where you need to be spending your advertising dollars, not just throwing them away in newspaper and radio. And the clients that were my customers, their customer retention rates went through the roof, experienced significant increase in sales and service business. I eventually caught the eye of the manufacturers, started working with Toyota and Ford, Nissan, Volvo, General Motors, to the point where they actually would subsidize the cost for the dealers up to 50%. So that became very successful. And then CRM became a buzzword in the industry, customer relation management. And knowing basically with my background in technology and also data management, I thought, hey, I should design the CRM application for the automotive industry. But it was too expensive to do in the Silicon Valley. So I said, well, no problem. Where should I go? And basically Research Triangle in North Carolina was starting to get some traction because ideally I need to hire developers. So I actually moved. I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. I started another company. The name of that company was eAuto Business. And eventually I became the pioneer. I developed the first web-based CRM application for the automotive industry.
So you were a billionaire by what age?
Yeah, here's the downside of it. And trust me, I was on track. I thought, yeah, I'm going to be a billionaire. And I developed the system. and had the opportunity to actually sell it to a company called Reynolds and Reynolds, a big predominant player in the automotive industry. Got to know the vice president quite well. And they even sent down their acquisition team to Charlotte, and we set aside the whole day. And they started out at about a tenth of what I thought the company should be acquired for, what our value was. And I knew that we weren't even remotely close. And I hate to say it, but I kind of kicked them to the curb after about an hour, even though their flight wasn't until that evening, and said, we're just too far apart. Well, I got a call from the vice president, and he said, Paige, he goes, we're offering you a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And you're a young man. If we don't acquire your company, we're going to have to acquire another company that's doing, what you're doing, or at least similar, maybe not as well, or we'll develop it ourselves. And being stubborn and egotistical, I was like, well, good luck, knock yourself out. Well, eventually, that's exactly what they did. And then companies very similar to my company, offering very similar services, started popping up left and right. Needless to say, I got a hard lesson on that. And I look back on it, and of course I should have sold it. I would have had a big success, notch in the belt.
But what was even, so that was a hard lesson, but what was even a harder lesson or more valuable lesson? Why was it that these guys were able to come up with a system that was just like yours?
Yeah, I know where you're going with this. So again, this is when I was, I'm a young man, somewhat naive, and wasn't familiar with IP law. In fact, I didn't even know that you could patent processes. I thought you had to come up with some discovery on something that's uniquely new, when in fact, you can take a combination of various business practices, bring them together, and you can actually patent that idea, which I didn't know. So in particularly patenting software processes. And had I known that, I would have written the patents, and I probably would have gotten patents issued, because again, I was the pioneer in this space. But eventually what happened was the company got to the point where it was worth pennies on the dollar compared to what I was striving for. And I made a deal with my own partners in the company. I was the CEO, that to buy me out, and I would take all my knowledge, everything that I've learned, and I could go apply it to any other industry with the exception of the automotive industry. And they agreed. So then what I did is, my background is in the oil and gas industry. I grew up in northern British Columbia. My dad actually had a pipeline construction company. Eventually, my brother even had a pipeline construction company. But I would often work out on pipeline projects, big projects, either when I was in high school or even going through college. And once in a while, we'd hit a pipeline, like right in the middle of a remote area out in the middle of nowhere, we'd hit another pipeline. And of course, we didn't know that pipeline was there. And when you hit a pipeline on a project, you got to shut the project down. The environmentalists have to come out, see what the damage is, have to mitigate the damages. And I'm talking about having, 400 or 500 people out there, big work crews. And so very costly to hit a pipeline. And I thought to myself, with my background in data management, my background in mapping, and my background in developing, web services that are run on large servers, that there would have to be able to, we'd have to be able to develop a system. We could do this, where we could identify where pipelines are located and display that information to the excavator. Very similar to OnStar. OnStar's navigational system, I call that heads up display, but it gets you from point A to point B. Basically that's maps that are loaded up in a system. That's General Motors' basically flagship product called OnStar.
Right.
That's why we're called Prostar. That's for public use, from getting you to point A to point B, whereas ours would be a heads up display system that is for professional purposes. And as a result of that, we came up with the name Prostar. But when I came up with this idea, the first thing I did is I went to see if anybody else was doing anything even remotely close to this, and found out that the answer was no. So what I did is I started writing the patents, and I wrote several patents. In fact, I spent 8 years developing the IP portfolio. And what a lot of people don't know is that you cannot commercialize a product and then patent it because it becomes public domain. In other words, it becomes known to the public. So you have to write the patents first, and then you can commercialize the product. Now, in many cases, that's why you don't have small companies that have patents, because they can't afford to sit around and do nothing, waiting for the patents to be issued. Big companies, yes. So normally it's reserved for big companies. But anyways, 8 years, several millions of dollars I spent because I had to prototype, test various things, work with different equipment manufacturers, and eventually the patents started getting issued. And once the patents got issued, then I commercialized the product. I started the company, and then went out to try and sell it and see if we could find people that we call trusted testers that would be willing to test it. And today, we have a very extensive IP portfolio. I have 20 patents that have already been issued, and these are called pioneer patents.
What is a pioneer patent? Because I can tell you that throughout my investing career, I have had a couple of really horrendous experiences with patents. So it's actually I got to the point where patents almost mean nothing to me anymore, because they can be ruled as obvious. There's a lot of different things that can make a patent not really that strong. So what is a pioneer patent? Because I had never heard of that before you.
So a pioneer patent means, number one, you were the first to get issued a patent in basically the realm or the space, including the methodologies and the processes that you are patenting, okay? And basically, the reason that patents sometimes can be circumvented, the way you can get around them, is you can change one or two things, and then that patent no longer covers your methods or processes. But a pioneer patent, in this case, the patents I have were written before the technology was available. So I really thought way ahead and got these patents issued before the technology was even available to make my patents capable of delivering on what I'm patenting. So that's why they're almost impossible to circumvent. I'm just going to give you an example, like in layman's terms, okay?
Okay.
I patented capturing buried utility and pipeline data on a mobile device. I mean, that's the patent. It's not difficult, right? So someone might say, well, that's obvious. Like,
yeah, that is kind of obvious. I would have to say that, Paige.
How'd you get that patent? Well, when I wrote the patent, we didn't have smartphones. Okay, so it's not so obvious. The other thing is, I wrote the patent on overlaying a map on a mobile device and capturing buried utility and pipeline data. That's another patent. Well, when I wrote that, there was no Google Maps. There was no maps on a mobile device. The other one is integrating GPS on a mobile device that has a map. And by the way, if you're going to capture utility data that's of any value buried in the ground, you have to have a mobile device, you have to have a map, and you have to have GPS. So that's an example of a pioneer patent. I'll give you one more example. When you're capturing the location of where a utility and pipeline is, you have to capture a lot of data that provides critical information. Otherwise, you don't have anything of any value. You need to know where it is, what it is, who put it there, when it was put there. These are basic data, basic information from data that you have to have. Okay, well, I'll just give you an example of another patent. I patented who, what, why, where, when, and how. Pretty difficult to get around because that covers all the information. And I could go on and on and on, because inside each patent, there's multiple claims, sometimes up to 10 to 20 claims. And if someone is infringing on one claim, then they're infringing on your patent. And we have 20 patents. So I don't know how many claims we have, but it's probably in the neighborhood of 150 to 200 claims. And they only have to be infringing on one. So I'm not going to rely on the patents. I'm going to rely on being first to market, providing a solution that offers tremendous return on investment. And I'm going to provide first class customer support and just be the best and first to market. But with that said, it's also nice to have patents because of what happened to me previously. And just to give you an example, I've already sent out 24 letters this year to companies that we identified are infringing on our patents, and even shared and disclosed which claims. But these are friendly letters. They're letters that basically say, hey, we'd like to partner with you, or you could license our IP. But those letters serve as notice, and that's when the clock starts ticking. And if
So
you can
Paige,
actually, yeah,
this is something that I happen to be very familiar with. So when you send out a nice little letter like that, a notification, you're saying, hey, by the way, you're violating one of our patents. And if they choose not to respond to you, but continue to violate those patents, when they go to court and you win because you have a pioneer patent, what happens with the penalty? I believe it becomes willful infringement.
yep,
And then that triples whatever the penalty is.
you got it. So when I send the letter out, when I say that's when the clock starts ticking, if I take them to court, say, for example, a year later, and we are awarded on the positive side, then it's 3 times the damages, and it starts from when I sent the letter out. So, you know, if it's, say, for example, on one thing, it's a loss of, say, $1.5 million in income during that 1 year period, then the penalty is 4.5 million. It's 3 times the damages. And it gets awarded quickly, especially if it's a pioneer patent. And once you get one customer that's infringing, then that sets precedents in
For all
court.
the future.
And that's not, and that you don't have to take everybody to court. You just say it's already set in precedence, and everybody, it'll get their attention. I mean, the reality of it is that in North America, because that's where I always focus, like I'm always very focused. I try not to get fragmented. These patents cover North America. This is by far the biggest market in the world, okay? And if I'm correct about our patents, and we can actually find other companies that are infringing on it, it means we're the only company in North America that can capture, record, and display where buried utilities and pipelines are.
What do you think that's worth, Paige?
It'd be tough to put a number on it, but I can tell you that in this industry right now, they spend $10 billion a year trying to identify where buried utilities and pipelines are. So
How much? Wait. Hold on a second. Let's back up. Can you repeat that number for me?
every year, just in the United States, we spend $10 billion a year trying to identify where buried utilities and pipelines are located below the surface of the earth. And we do a terrible job at it too.
That's just trying to identify.
That's it.
That's just trying to identify 10 billion. Okay.
10 billion. And you know, you're going to laugh at this if you're not familiar with the process. We send people out there to locate where the utilities and pipelines are. And there's tools out there now that can locate where utilities and pipelines are the majority of the time. There's some instances, and I can go over it in detail, where it might be difficult to identify where a utility or pipeline is. A lot of it has to do with what type of material is involved. But majority of the time, we can locate where utilities and pipelines are. But you know how we let people know where they are? You would think that we would collect the data and share it with them. We put a paint mark on the ground. We actually spray a paint mark on the ground and draw like a line that says, this is where the gas line is, okay? Number one, it makes a mess on the pavement. Number two, if it's a dirt road, it's not gonna last very long. If it's snow and the sun comes out, it's gonna melt. If it rains, you can't see it. I mean,
well, it's temporary paint too, isn't it? I mean, it's not permanent.
No, that's
temporary paint.
No. That's one of the biggest advancements we've made in 30 years. Is we now
it's now permanent.
We now have paint It's more permanent. I mean, that's kind of the answer to, well, isn't that temporary by nature? No, no. In the last 25 years, they've made a huge innovation, better paint.
Interesting. And who marks those? Who marks the paint on the ground?
So what happens is you call into, and this is by law, you call into a state one call center called 811. You see signs all over.
Call before you dig.
It's call before you dig. So you call into the center, let them know where you're going to be doing construction. And then what they do as best they can, based on the information that's been provided to them, which is not very good information from the utility and pipeline companies. Matter of fact, most of it's based on paper maps. They try and figure out who's going to be impacted by the construction, especially if there's digging involved. And then what they do is they notify the utility and pipeline companies, hey, you better go out and mark where your utilities and pipelines are, to make sure that they're not hit during this construction. So generally what they do is they call a contract company that gets paid to put paint marks on the ground. And that's what they get paid to do. And they send these low-level workers out with very little training or certification to go out. And they use electromagnetic locate devices, which can locate where the utility or pipeline is. It picks up a signal, but then they put a paint mark on the ground, and they're actually paid to put a paint mark on the ground. Well, the problem is, number one, I don't know if they actually identified or captured the right utility. I don't know if they actually identified or captured any utility at all. And sometimes actually they can't find the utility. And you know what they do? Well, because those paint marks are out there still from, a week ago or 2 weeks ago or a year ago, they just paint over top of the paint marks.
So
Tim, it doesn't work. I'll give you an example. I mentioned we spend $10 billion a year trying to identify where utilities and pipelines are, yet we have $30 billion worth of damages every year. So whatever we're doing, it's not working real well. And it's time for a change. I mean, with all this modern technology, we're putting paint marks on the ground. It's almost like it's almost like football. It's like, come on, man.
So let me ask you, I mean, they're putting paint marks on the ground. How many of the general contractors actually rely on those paint marks?
Oh, it's a great question. They don't. They know they can't. No way. The risk and liability of hitting like a gas line, a fiber optic line can be $1 million an hour fine. Okay.
How much?
$1 million an hour.
For cutting a fiber optic line.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, you got to imagine, I mean, number one, we got a lot of fiber optic lines, but just think who depends on that. Hospitals, police stations, universities. Of course, I mean, Wall Street. I mean, if you hit a fiber optic line, it can impact our economy, especially locally, wherever that line was hit. But back to your question, no, the construction companies, the engineering and surveying companies, and the excavating companies that are involved in these projects that actually take on the risk and liability, they don't trust those paint marks at all.
So if they don't trust the paint marks, and we don't have any digital plans that accurately point out where these utilities are, what do they have to do?
They bring out what's called a hydrovac truck, and I'll kind of explain it in layman's terms what that is, okay? It's a big truck that actually drills a hole in the pavement over top of the paint mark. And then it has a giant vacuum system on it that sucks the dirt out into a tank on the truck. And they do that to expose where that utility is. Like they want to see it with their own eyes because they don't trust that paint mark. And a lot of times that paint mark's not correct. So they'll have to move over a couple feet and start the process over again until they find that utility line. Well, number one, it damages the pavement, obviously. I mean, you're drilling a hole in the pavement and you don't stick the material back on top of the hole. You have to dispose of it. It's a very onerous process. It's very time consuming and it's very expensive, but this is what they have to do. I'll give you an example. One of our clients is Kiewit, and they're on a project on
you said Kiewit?
Yeah, Kiewit.
Okay.
Kiewit's one of the largest infrastructure construction companies in the world. And on the I-70 project, prior to bringing us onto the project, they had drilled over 35,000 holes because they need to locate where all the utilities and pipelines are. And this is a massive project. It's a $2 billion project. It's going to take about 5 years to complete is the estimate. And they have to locate thousands of utilities and pipelines. And that's what they do. They go out and hydrovac. Well, I'm sure we'll get into it, but today Kiewit's our client. Why? Because we can digitally capture and record and display the precise location of a utility or pipeline in the ground down to the centimeter.
Wait a minute. So down to the centimeter, but you're still going to have to core at least one hole, right? To get a visual.
Well, generally, this is what they do, and I'm glad they do it. I think it's intelligent to do this. So let's just say the way they do it today is they drill a hole. Let's just say they drill a hole every 10 feet, just to make sure they can see exactly where that utility line is. Okay. Well, with our system, because we can capture exactly where that utility line is, and then we capture the metadata that supports that we're capturing it correctly, that provides what I call data quality and data confidence, that what they can do is then just to test and qualify that our system is accurate, they can do it maybe every 100, 200, or 300 feet. And we've done this enough times now that when we tell them that's where that utility line is, and they drill a hole in the ground to see if we're correct, we're always spot on.
So how are you spot on? I mean, what is enabling you to pinpoint accuracy on where these utility lines lay?
Okay, and again, I'll get into this, and keep in mind, this is also part of our patented process, okay?
Okay.
So there's devices out there called electromagnetic utility and pipe locate tools, okay? Think of it kind of as a metal detector. You're out on the beach and you're trying to find a coin.
So it's like what this guy's got here on this slide of your deck, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Matter of fact, that one right there is manufactured by a UK company called Radio Detection. That's an RD 8100 in his hand. We're partners with Radio Detection. What you do is each utility provides a unique identification code based on currency and frequency. So you dial the currency and frequency into the device, and then you go out there and you kind of start waving it around, and then it'll give you a signal strength, maybe like 80%. And as you get closer, 89%, you get closer, 94%, until you're right over top of it. And then it'll start beeping like beep, 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 beep. And then they usually put the paint mark down. Okay. Now, you would think with modern technology, including cloud, GPS, and mobile, that you would collect the data that's coming off that device that tells me that you located it. In other words, I'll give you an example. And again, this is patented. What type of device are you using so that I know that that device is qualified to identify where a utility or pipeline is buried? Okay. Then what you can do is then also pair it with a precision GPS device. So the device that's on a mobile, the GPS that's embedded on a mobile device is accurate to about 1 to 3 meters. And everyone's probably familiar with Google Maps.
Right.
You pull it up, you're looking for an unfamiliar destination, either a hotel or a friend's house. It gets you out in front. You can either see the home address or you can see, the sign of the hotel, and you're like, oh, I'm here. The app's done its job. You can turn it off. But remember, what we need to do is get down to the centimeter, because I'm identifying something that you're not going to see. So you can't be within 1 to 3 meters, because I can fit, 100 utility lines stacked on top of each other and beside each other between 1 to 3 meters. We have to be down to the centimeter. So we pair with what's called a precision GPS receiver that will get you centimeter accuracy. So we're capturing the data from the electromagnetic locate device, and we're capturing the data from the GPS device, all onto the mobile device. And then that data, as soon as it's captured, goes up to the cloud where we run it through our algorithms and our post-processing. And in a couple seconds, we make that information available to whoever needs it, including the field crews, anybody back at the office, or coming back to OnStar, the guy that's in the cab of the excavating equipment, he can all of a sudden now see where the utility lines are. And the large majority of the time, I'm talking over 90% of the time, where utility and pipeline companies think their utilities are and the information that they share with everybody is incorrect. It has no geospatial value to it. Sometimes it's off by as little as maybe a few feet, but the majority of the time, the discrepancy is large to the point where a lot of times it's on the other side of the road. And they're digging away thinking, well, we can dig away because that fiber optic line or that gas line or that pipeline is over on the other side of the road, when in fact, it's on the side of the road where you're digging, but no one's aware of it.
So I can share with you that from my experience with we talked about the fact that what would you say the percentage of our utilities are still on paper? The plans for those things are still on paper. What percentage of the utilities that are in the ground do you think is still on paper? No digital footprint.
Yeah, well, let's just step back for a second, okay? Number one, here's the number. We have over 35 million miles of buried utilities and pipelines just in the United States. To put that into relevant terms, we have about 2.4 million miles of paved roads. And a large majority of those utilities and pipelines are buried below the paved roads. So just imagine that, 2.4 million miles of paved roads, 35 million miles of buried utilities and pipelines. And a vast majority of those utilities and pipelines were put into the ground between 60 to 100 years ago. In fact, most of our water systems in most of our large cities are up to 100 years old, okay? Now, 60 to 100 years ago, there was very little oversight or regulation on where utilities or pipelines were going into the ground. So in a lot of cases, we have no maps. We don't have any information on where they are, okay? Now, in the last, say, 50 years, where there's a little bit more regulation and oversight, when we tell the utility and pipeline companies, hey, you need to provide to us where your utilities and pipelines are, I would say that 90% of the information that is available is on paper maps. These are called as-built drawings. These are the original planning and design drawings on how these utilities are planned to go into the ground, okay? Now, how they're planned to go into the ground and how they actually go into the ground is two different case scenarios for multiple reasons. I mean, maybe the ground conditions are too hard, or you come across some type of underground structure, even if it's just a rock, and you have to go around it. But in addition to that, I mean, it's a contractor. I mean, he's going to take the path of least resistance because he's going to try and get it done in a timely manner. And if he gets it done faster than he projected, he's going to make more money. And then they bury them. So you don't see where they are anyways. But as long as it's close enough, then it's good enough. And that's where we're starting to run into the problem today, because close enough is no longer good enough. But then they sign off on those planning and design drawings, which means those drawings become the system of record of where those utilities and pipelines are buried. So they're inaccurate by nature. And this has been going on for 50 years. Now, some people might say, wait a minute, I know a company and they have digital records in either a GIS system or a CAD system of where the utilities and pipelines are buried. And yeah, you know where they got the information from? They took them off the paper as-built drawings and entered it into a digital system, which means, okay, yeah, they're digital, but you know what? They're inaccurate. And this is common knowledge in this industry. As a matter of fact, GIS, Geographic Information Systems, are probably the most popular system of record of where utilities and pipelines are. That's where they store the records. In the engineering and surveying world, they say, you know what GIS stands for? It doesn't stand for Geographic Information Systems. It stands for Get It Surveyed. In other words, they're not accurate.
So it, I'm just going to go off of my experience back in the days of construction. I mean, if I was out on a job and a pipe needed to go here according to the as build, and there's a boulder the size of a Volkswagen Bug directly in that path, am I going to try and go through the boulder, or am I going to move it either 10 feet to the left or 10 feet to the right? Right.
Yeah, no brainer.
I'm not going through the boulder. And I, like you said, close enough is good enough, right? Who's gonna see it? Nobody. So it's very understandable that your thesis that the plans that are out there, even if they are digital, because that was pulled from the as-built plans, are highly inaccurate.
That's exactly right.
So what does that equate to in terms of opportunity for Prostar?
Well, it's tremendous opportunity because we've designed a system that can digitally capture, record, and display in real time the precise location of buried utilities down to the centimeter, which is what we call survey grade, which is, a lot of our clients are big, large engineering and surveying firms, and they specialize in what's called subsurface utility engineering. There's actually an acronym for it called SUE, subsurface utility engineering. And it's taken us a long time, like several years, to convince the engineers and the surveyors that we can actually capture data down to the centimeter, do all the calculations in the cloud in a couple seconds, and provide that information back to them. It was, once again, it was one of those things that I was told years ago that will never be able to be done. Like, you can't do that.
So once your system does that, it's then recorded into the cloud, and now you have a digital footprint of those utilities in that area stored to almost 100% accuracy forever, right?
That's correct.
And who owns that data?
The client. I've been in the data business long enough to know that you never want to tell anyone that you own their data. We are a data management and a data aggregation platform. We're managing the data for the client. So if it's an engineering and surveying firm, it's their data. And then they're probably providing that data back to the utility or pipeline owner, be it the state, or maybe it's a fiber optic company or an oil and gas company or a municipality.
But they're not obligated to share that data with them, are they?
No, they don't have to. But if you think about it, the way it works today is no one's sharing any data. So imagine the value proposition that we provide to a large construction company or an engineering firm, that when they're completed the project, they have a perfect digital imprint of where all the utilities and pipelines are located. And the way our system works, because I mentioned we're a data management system, we're also a data aggregation platform. What I mean by that is we can seamlessly integrate into any system of record, including CAD systems and GIS systems. Those are either a CAD system or a GIS system is where data is stored, where they think their utilities and pipelines are. We can take that imprint of precisely where they are located, and they can seamlessly download that into their system of record and update all their information so that we can provide where their utilities are actually buried, and they can update their records. Now, utility companies and pipeline companies are asset centric. What I mean by that is their whole business operations are based on knowing where their utilities and pipelines are and what condition they're in. So we provide huge value to the utility and pipeline companies because they can update their data. So we become a key differentiator for the construction companies and the construction companies and the engineering and surveying firms, because now they've got this nice little package that they can go back to the utility and pipeline companies and say, hey, you can update your records. So the way I'm looking at this is that the big construction companies that we're working with and the big engineering firms, they just one up their competition. And when you do that, it's going to force their competition to say, hey, wait, we better be doing that as well. Otherwise, we provide a tremendous competitive advantage, right? Here's the other thing too. Like you take Kiewit on that I-70 project. When we're done that project, they'll have spent tens of millions of dollars identifying where all the utilities and pipelines are, okay? This is where Kiewit's smart, because they came back to us and said, how much would it cost to store that data for up to 30 years, okay? And we use a terminology, I call it freeze the data, where you can actually take it off the servers and you can just store it like in a freezer, okay? So that, let's just say that Department of Transportation in Colorado, they're the ones that own, I-70. Let's say 5 years later, they come back and say, hey, let's go ahead. We'd like to expand the freeway again. There's a new subdivision going in. So we got to put some on ramps and some off ramps. We'll put out a request for proposal and we'll send it out to, 10 of these large construction companies, of which Kiewit is one. Normally, they have to put about a 2 to 3% variance into their bid because of the risk of not knowing where utilities and pipelines are, okay? They can call us up and say, hey, can you spin that data back up onto our server? And all of a sudden, we've got where all the utilities and pipelines are located, which reduces the risk and liability, as I mentioned, of tens of millions of dollars of potential damages. That gives them such a competitive edge that they're gonna get the bid, because they can underbid by maybe 30 or 40 million dollars and not be concerned about the risk or liability.
So here's what's interesting. So I'm very familiar with Kiewit, and there may be some people that are watching that are not, because it's not exactly a household name, but just so everybody understands, I put up Kiewit here is one of North America's largest, most respected engineering and construction organizations in the United States, 12.5 billion in revenues. This is no small company that you partnered with.
No, this is it's funny because their logo is gold, but I call it, this is the gold standard in infrastructure construction. So if you take a look at who builds our roads, bridges, highways, dams, railway systems, I think Kiewit actually is number one. There's large construction companies out there, the size of Kiewit, but their core competency is roads, bridges, highways, dams, and railway systems. And of course, that's our focus, critical infrastructure, both above ground and below ground.
So let's just real quickly, I just want to touch on just so we've got wastewater, we've got water, we've got gas, electric, cable, fiber optics, and am I missing anything else?
Sewer.
A sewer, right? Wastewater. So yeah. I think that covers it, right? Though I think that's pretty much everything.
Absolutely.
So okay, that's an awful lot. That's an awful lot of pipes, right? So where is, because I know that recently, because of the Flint, Michigan, and the water issues that we have been having in some of these areas, the PFAS is another, the forever chemical that's polluting some of the water. I know that there are some cities or states that are trying to figure out where their water lines are. So yes. Where are water lines in comparison to all the other utilities that we just talked about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, if you take a look at the, trillion plus infrastructure bill that I think will eventually get passed, because I think both parties agree that this is so critical, not only to our economy, but to protecting the public and the environment. So hundreds of billions is earmarked for, our roads, bridges, highways, and our railway systems, but also several hundred billions of dollars are also going to be earmarked for our drinking water systems, our wastewater systems, and also to expand broadband, okay? Now, the key to this is you can't do construction on the surface infrastructure or the below ground infrastructure without impacting one another, okay? In both cases, you have to know where the utilities and pipelines are, okay? Now, if they're going to repair or replace are water systems and sewage. Okay. Those are the utilities that are buried deepest into the ground. So I don't know the exact distance that they're buried into the ground, but let's just say it's between 15 to 30 feet. And I know in some cases it might even be up to 50 feet. Okay. They're buried deep, deep, deep into the ground. Okay.
Okay.
Now, with that said, the majority of utilities and pipelines are buried to about 6 feet. Okay.
Okay.
So the large majority of 35 million miles of utilities and pipelines are buried on top of our water systems and our sewage systems. So my question is, how are you going to get to them to repair or replace them without damaging all the other tens of millions of miles of utilities and pipelines? And the answer is you can't, unless you can precisely locate where they are. Otherwise, I kind of tease on this a little bit. I mean, it would be like a 2-year-old doing heart surgery with a spoon. And by the way, the number one locate tool in this industry is not an electromagnetic utility and pipe locator. It's still the bucket of a backhoe. And that's sad.
The
But
bucket
I'm
of
going to
a
give you,
backhoe, which is a pretty big bucket.
that's what we're using. So that's when you really know that you located a utility and a pipeline. But here's the problem. And I firmly believe this, and I don't know the exact number, but let's just say that we spend $1 trillion on our roads, bridges, highway systems, railway systems, water, sewage, and expanding our broadband. I wouldn't be surprised if we do $1 trillion worth of damage. I mean, there's going to be lights going out in cities, fiber optic lines down. We're going to be hitting gas lines, which can cause explosions and loss of life. We're going to have fires. We're going to have dangerous petroleum products that are seeping into our water systems, unless there's a solution out there that can help them identify, almost like see below ground. Like we kind of call ourselves the Google of the underground, a system that allows you to visualize where all the buried utilities and pipelines are so that you know how to get to them and how to avoid the ones that you don't want to hit. And I think that's why we're positioned so well, because that's the system. Not only have we designed this system, it's been tested by the largest infrastructure construction company, the largest subsurface utility engineering firms. My partners are all of the equipment manufacturers that develop the electromagnetic locate devices and the GPS devices. In fact, one of my business partners is Trimble. That's the largest geospatial technology company in the world and the leader in the development of GPS and GNSS equipment, as well as surveying and engineering equipment. Why do these companies partner with Prostar? It's real simple. We've developed something that they were unable to do, and they partner with us because we significantly enhance the performance of their equipment and provide significant increase in value to their clients. Now, that says a lot about Prostar as well. I mean, number one.
So when you say you partnered with Trimble, I mean, I think a lot of my people are going to know exactly who Trimble is because they're a publicly traded company, multi-billion-dollar company. So when you say partnered with them, what does that mean?
So Trimble knew that we were working with like Kiewit, and another client of ours, and I can get into a little more detail, is also CDOT. So we have also a government agency that's our partner. And government agencies, every state, has billions of dollars that they spend, every year, and they need equipment for surveying and also GPS equipment. And of course, Trimble's the leader. So their biggest clients are, Department of Transportation and companies like Kiewit. So when we're working with companies like that, and they hear that we have a mobile device that works on a standard phone or tablet that you can buy at Best Buy or at Verizon, then it catches their attention. So they asked us to meet with them. So we went up and met with them, demonstrated what we were doing. And this is the truth. They said, listen, we've tried to develop what you guys have developed. And we were unable to do it. We've acquired companies that we thought could do what you're doing, and they're unable to do it. In fact, we don't even know how the hell you're doing it, but you're obviously doing it. We want to partner with you. We want to be a business partner, and we'll allow you the highest level of integration. So they open up their code in their GPS receivers to us to the point where it's the highest level of integration than any other company in the world. That's what we were told. But what that allows us to do now is to go to these large construction companies around the world and large engineering and surveying firms that use Trimble equipment. And we can significantly improve the way that they capture and record where utilities and pipelines are buried. And they don't have to reinvest into anything because we seamlessly integrate into the equipment that they've already made, millions and millions of dollars of investment in. We just work seamlessly with it. So it's
let me just hold on one second, Paige. You just said something that kind of stuck out to me, which was the world. This isn't just a system that's just going to work in the United States.
No, it's a great. So, what I did about 3 years ago, when I developed the solution and I went to Kiewit and asked if they would become a client and pay me annually to use our solution. And then I went to CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation, and said, would you be willing to pay me annually and, basically embrace our solution into your operations? And they said yes. At that point, I knew I had something. Okay. But I've been involved in the technology industry for 25 years. And normally what happens is you develop a technology, you go get a couple clients, it works, and then you start adding more and more clients. Well, what I did is I wanted to make sure, number one, that our solution could support global operations. I mean, I know it sounds funny, but what gets me up every morning is, I want to build $1 billion company, billion plus. Okay. Well, that requires a lot. Number one, can your technology support that level of operations? And in most cases, for a small startup, it can't. Maybe some company, big company comes in and looks at it, or they acquire you. Normally what they have to do is redevelop what you've developed. What you've developed is basically a prototype of what really needs to be a much larger scale solution. So what I did 3 years ago, after I got Kiewit and CDOT, I hired one of the top C-level recruiting firms in North America to find a chief operating officer for me. He'd be my right-hand man who's got a lot more experience than me in building and scaling companies to global operations. And we found about 56, 57 candidates. I narrowed it down to 5. I personally interviewed all of them on site. And then I selected one, and his name was Vasa Desan. Vasa is the former chief technology officer of Sun Microsystems, which in its heyday was the largest technology company in the world. Eventually was acquired by Oracle. And I'll give you an example. One of Vasa's greatest accolades is he's personally responsible for migrating Wall Street to the internet. This was before, internet had redundant and secure systems. He had to develop that out. You could imagine people, who were going to be trading going, we're going to be trading, over the internet. Like, where's all this information going to go? And what happens if the system's down even for a matter of seconds or somebody hacks into it? But needless to say, I brought Vasa in. And the first thing I said to Vasa was, Vasa, I need you to go through our technology diligently, do a deep dive, and tell me if this will scale globally, and can we build $1 billion organization on top of it? And he came back to me about a month later and said, I got some bad news. And I said, well, it's probably nothing that I didn't expect. What is it? He goes, no. He goes, your system probably couldn't support 30 clients without causing a lot of issues and being a big resource suck. Okay. And so I said, okay, let's redevelop it. And I said, how long do you think that's going to take? And he kind of smiled a little bit at me and he goes, well, number one, we're going to have to completely replace your development team. I need to bring in developers that have their master's degree in computer science that have worked for some of the largest technology companies in the world. We need to open up an office in Boulder, Colorado, because where you live is a small rural area and we're not going to be able to attract this level of resources. And Boulder's where everyone's migrating to out of the Silicon Valley, and it's where the big technology companies have offices. And I said, okay, now here's the $1 million question. How much is this going to cost? So it's going to cost several millions of dollars. So I said, okay, this is going to take a few years, cost several millions of dollars. I have to open up an office in Boulder and hire.
And you have to get rid of your staff.
Get rid of my staff because our development office was in Raleigh, North Carolina, because of my background coming from Research Triangle. So I said, okay, get started on Monday. Well, that was almost 3 years ago. And on March 31st of this year, we introduced what we call Pointman Pro. Pointman Pro is running on the most modern mobile and cloud platform that's available throughout the world. In other words, we've developed the most modern mapping system in the world, runs on AWS, works anywhere in the world, any language, any currency. And on top of that, everything's automated. It used to take me 30 days to set up a client, 30 days. Okay. Then eventually I got that down to about 2 weeks, and I was pretty excited about that. Now to set up a client takes less than 1 minute. We push a button, everything's automated, the servers spin out, they can load their own data, they can self-administer the system. You can buy it using credit card. We created our own store, like Apple Store or Google Play. We've created our own. I can address any data security issues. I'll give you an example on that because that's a question that often comes up. What about data security? Well, most countries have what they call data sovereignty laws, where they don't want any of the data leaving the country. So you can't have a server in the United States that's managing data for a client, say, for example, that's in Germany, okay? Well, with AWS, their servers can, the way that their servers work is that they have servers literally in every country throughout the world. So we can address data sovereignty and ensure the client that the data will never leave the country. The other thing is because we've developed such a modern platform, and I don't think any of our competitors could actually say this, is we're what's known as SOC 2 compliant. That's the highest level of data security that you can attain. And you have to have all of the systems, business practices, all the processes in place and go through an audit every year to prove that you have that level of data security. And oddly enough, utility and pipeline companies are more sensitive about their data than the Department of Defense. And that's one of the things that we can assure them is that on our system, even though it's cloud and mobile, and a lot of people don't understand cloud and mobile, they think, well, how secure is the data? We can assure them that their data is secure. Now, one of the examples I always give is that, every day we're shopping on Amazon, we're using Venmo to transfer, money to friends and family. We buy things just with a simple scan of our phone. We trade stocks on our mobile devices, right? So, and you don't think about data security. Point of it being is that where technology is today, as long as you are operating off a modern platform, then you can put protocols into place that ensure that the data is secure. And I'm proud to say that we can, and we have put those protocols into place.
So March of this year is when you actually launched the software. So
The new platform.
You are in the very early stages of your growth, right? Your growth phase. You're literally just getting started.
Yeah, basically what you don't want to do. So we had Kiwit and we had CDOT operating off the old platform.
Okay.
Now, this is why a lot of the bigger companies can't catch us. Okay, and I'll explain why. It's called cannibalizing your own operations. We literally had to cannibalize our old platform and redevelop every single piece of code in our mobile application and also on our cloud operating platform. Okay, that's why it took several years. Every single string of code. Okay. Now, the way Kiewit works is each one of their projects is identified as a client. The project is the client, okay? And currently we have 5 Kiewit projects on the old platform. And then I had CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation, on the old platform. Now, what you don't want to do is continue to bring clients onto the old platform, because eventually you have to migrate them onto the new platform. And I'll give you an example. We brought the Pointman Pro out March 31st. It's going to take me till the end of the year to migrate one client, which is CDOT. So imagine if I had 100 clients. Imagine if I had 1,000 clients multiplied by 9 months for each client. It would be impossible to migrate them over, okay? So what our plan was not bring on any more clients, okay? Keep the Kiewit projects where they are, which on average have a lifespan of about 2 to 5 years. And once the project is completed, then we shut that server down. So eventually, all 5 of the servers for the 5 projects will be shut down. We don't have to migrate them over. We only have to migrate CDOT. And then since March, we've been onboarding a significant amount of clients in multiple industries onto the new platform. So we're starting to see that ramp up now, not only in client acquisition, but we're moving into multiple markets. So we were in construction and engineering and surveying. And then we also, what I call government, which is Department of Transportation. But just recently, like in the last month, we've now expanded into utility. And we're also seeing tremendous success in the municipal market, which I think could be the biggest opportunity for us, not just in the United States.
Let's talk about that for a minute. So as a result of this project in Denver, in the state of Colorado has done something I can honestly say that I don't recall ever seeing. And when you first told me about it, caught me a little off guard, but maybe you can share with viewers here what the state of Colorado has done since you finished that project with Kiewit.
Yeah, so basically CDOT's been a client of ours now for well over 2 years, okay? Now keep in mind that when we first brought Kiewit on and CDOT, they signed up for 1 year, okay? They were willing to be what's known as an early adopter and test our system, but they weren't changing their current business practices because, you know, too much risk and liability just to stop what they're doing and bring in a new technology that is disruptive. Okay, I mean, what we're doing is a disruptive technology. We're bringing a disruptive technology to an industry that's been well entrenched in the same business practices for over 25 years. Okay, so they said, yes, we'd be willing to test it. In fact, here's what Kiewit said to us. If you have what it appears you have the holy grail of the construction industry. Everyone has been chasing this, okay, for a quarter century. So yes, we're willing to test it because we always like to be on the cutting edge of new technology. In fact, Kiewit has their own technology division called Kiewit Technology Group, of which Kiewit is only 5% of the revenue. So it's a global company. So they're always developing new technologies, okay? So when we showed it to them, they said, we're going to put you on the I-70 expansion through Denver. It's an 11-mile stretch of I-70 interstate, which is basically the busiest section of the busiest stretch of interstate in the country, okay? And they're going to be relocating sections of the interstate and relocating subdivisions. They said this is one of the most complex projects in terms of trying to identify where utilities and pipelines are buried, and there's going to be thousands of them, okay? So they put us on that project, and we had huge success. In fact, in the first year, we were able to quantify that we reduced utility strikes by over 97%. Now, that's millions and millions and millions of dollars in savings just in avoiding hitting the utilities and pipelines, not to mention how much it would cost to have the crews down while they're trying to figure out and repair what they hit, okay? Now, that stretch of interstate is obviously owned by the state. Colorado Department of Transportation. So we also went over to CDOT again and said, would you be willing to test it for 1 year? Well, they tested it for 1 year, and it was so successful that in the second year, which the press release I think went out on January 14th of this year, Colorado Department of Transportation mandated into state law Pointman, which is the name of our software. Pointman is our flagship product. That's what
I'm
we
sorry,
call it.
hold on a second. They did what? They mandated it into what?
They mandated into state law our software. It's not a similar software or something that operates similarly by name, mandated into state law that if you're a utility company or a pipeline company, a construction company, engineering or surveying firm, or a municipality, anyone that has utilities and pipelines on a state right of way, and by the way, that's where everyone places their utilities and pipelines because it's the easiest access and the state doesn't charge to have them placed on their right of way. But by law, you have to use Prostar's Pointman software to identify the precise location of where that utility and pipeline is buried and then provide that information back to the state. Now, number one, you could imagine the credibility and visibility that provides to us. But the other thing it does, and we've now seen the fruit of our labor as a result of this, it enforces companies to use our software that provide services to the state. And then once they use our solution, they realize how it could significantly improve their own business operations, streamline their workflow processes. And so we're starting to see adoption. But the best thing is some of these companies are national. They have operations throughout the United States. So they're adopting it throughout their own business operations. And I mean, I could go through a handful of companies as examples. We've got
Well, Paige, let me ask you. I mean, if there's nobody out there that has a system that is there anything out there that comes remotely close to the capabilities of what you guys do?
Here's the best way for me to explain it. Number one, you don't want to be the only one out there. You don't want to be the lone soldier, okay? Because that means number one, that's probably no adoption in the market yet. And change management is sometimes the most difficult thing to control when you come out with a disruptive technology. You don't know when you're going to see the adoption. You know it's coming, but is it this year or is it 10 years out? And of course, you know, you'd have to survive that 10 years. So we're starting to see other companies starting to provide what we provide, no pun intended on the surface. But when you do a deep dive, no one provides centimeter accuracy on a standard mobile device, doing all the calculations in the cloud in real time and making that information readily available to whoever needs it, including in the field or in the office. And on top of that, our price point is ridiculously low. And yet we run over 80% profit margin. And that might be number one deterrent is that, I mean, I'm providing services, for example, to cities that run their entire municipal operations as far as managing all of their above ground critical infrastructure and below ground infrastructure. And what we're charging some of these small municipalities, if you look at a competitor, say, for example, ESRI, I mean, the commission they would pay their salesperson is probably greater than what we're charging as a fee annually to the city. Like, it's so disruptive. Like, sometimes people say, I can't believe you're charging that little. Like, is that possible? And I'm like, well, we're running over 80% profit margins. And not only that, you know, I want to be first to market and I want to go fast and I want to gobble up as much market share as I can. So I'm happy that our prices are where they are, because if we look at it just in the United States, we could be a very, very big company and I'd be happy based on what we're charging. But at the end of the day, once we get up to about 50 to 100 clients, I'll revisit our revenue model and what we're charging. And I could easily increase our pricing by 20 to 30%, and no one's going to care. And once we get up to about 50 to 100 clients, we're going to be like the de facto name, in the market. And the more clients we get, the more clients we're going to get, because other people see what we're doing. It's already happening already. I mean, we're at the point right now, and I didn't know when this would happen. And I'm happy that it's happening as soon as it is. But I'll give you an example. We're moving into the utility market. I'm not doing any selling or marketing in the utility market. My focus has always been on the construction companies and engineering surveying firms, because I like to be methodical and tactical and strategic. Don't get too fragmented, focus. But what's happening is we've got utility companies calling us. We've got municipalities that are calling us, and we're signing them up, and we're asking them, how are you finding us? They go, easy. We go online and we Google like keywords in like utility mapping, and you guys pop up, and we take a look at what you're providing, who your clients are, and we call you. We want to talk to you, and we're signing them up. In fact, on Friday, we got a call from a zoo in Oklahoma, and it appears we're going to sign the zoo. And my people might laugh, like, a zoo? Yeah, a zoo also has to manage their infrastructure, including where their utilities and pipelines are. I've already thought of the marketing campaign because they have penguins there, and I thought, zoo in Oklahoma adopts Prostar's solution to protect the environment, the public, and the penguins. I just think that's kind of a humorous campaign.
Right.
But I'll give you another example. We recently signed a university in Iowa, and somebody might say, a university has an ecosystem. They're a microcosm of a municipality or a state. They have utilities they have to manage. They need to know where the fiber optic is. They need to know where the water systems are. They need to know where the benches on the park are. They need to know where trees are. They need to know where road signs are. And our system provides a full enterprise management system for all their assets. And guess what? Under $10,000 a year.
It's funny. We're talking all about just utilities, but really your system can be used for anything, right? Identification above ground, underground. I mean, it's a precise identification mapping system that uploads to the cloud. And yes, we're talking about the utilities because that is a huge, huge issue, but this can be used for just about anything.
Well, and I'm just going to paint a little picture here, just so it's not too complicated, so that, your listeners can understand what it is that we're talking about, okay? If you take a look at, I'll just use a municipality, a city, small city as an example, okay? They have a huge burden on their shoulders to manage what I call their critical assets, okay? And it's their responsibility to make sure that everything is working and they know where it's at and they understand the condition that it's in, okay? Because they serve the public, they protect our environment. That's their job, okay? That's why they get a budget. That's why they charge us taxes, okay? So when you think about things like road signs, street lights, parking meters, manhole covers, I would say sewer drainage, fire hydrants, trees, not to mention their water systems and the sewage systems. That's a big, complex operating system, okay? A vast majority of those assets today are on a paper map that's in a file drawer. So if all of a sudden they have to work on something, they go into the file drawer, they pull out the paper map, they take copies of it, and they give it to people and say, these are where the assets are. Now, we live in a modern era where technology is disrupting old business practices and workflow processes. But this industry, the construction, engineering, and surveying industry, which is the industry that either builds or manages and maintains those assets, has been mired down in the same business practices for over 25 years. They're known as a lag. It's called a lagger, where they're like the last to change or adopt modern technology. We come along and we have a system that can digitally map where all the assets are, above ground or below ground. We make that information available on a mobile phone so that anybody that needs that information, they don't need a paper map. They can get it sent out to their mobile phone. For example, you can pull up your phone and you can see exactly where the utilities and pipelines are buried below the ground, or you can walk up to a manhole cover and it'll tell you the conditions it's in, the last time it was inspected. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And then, as I mentioned, the way that we have our security protocols set up, we can determine who gets that information, how long do they get it, can they view it only, are they allowed to edit it? I mean, we've built out a very complex system that I would argue every construction company, every engineering and surveying firm, every municipality, every university, every zoo, every utility company, every pipeline company, number
Well, my
one.
question is, Paige, if they don't, I mean, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't every insurance company that bonds a construction job, why wouldn't they require your software on their job?
I think that that's what's going to happen next. Now, just keep in mind, and I think that's the opportunity for investors, right? I mean, we're early stage. We're just coming to market and we are turning an industry upside down on its head on providing something that everyone said can't be done. Eventually, what's going to happen is that if we can reduce the amount of risk and liability that we're proving that we can, and we're also showing that we're significantly improving the protection of the public, of the worker, and our environment, I think eventually we do get adopted as part of insurance carriers' policies that they demand that you have to be using Prostar's solution. I'll give you an example. Walk out on a construction site without a hard hat. Now, why do you think they make them wear a hard hat? Because after a while, there were too many head injuries as a result of not wearing a hard hat. And then they decided better wear a hard hat.
So OSHA is one of the most powerful organizations out there in the construction world, right? Safety, protection. OSHA can shut down a job site in a heartbeat. There is definitely a safety component to your software, right?
Absolutely.
If you can avoid hitting a water main or a gas line or cutting out the electrical power. I can just give you an example here in Las Vegas when the Paris hotel contractors, cut the power and the hotel was shut down for 2 days. Had to move all those people. They lost a lot of gaming revenue. They had to throw out, I'm sure, a bunch of food. What do you think the insurance company's bill was for that 2 days that the Paris hotel was shut down?
I can't imagine, but it wasn't cheap. I can tell you that. You're talking, I mean, you're talking, could be $1 million an hour, easy or more.
So with that in mind, I want to focus on one last thing, because I can't thank you enough for the amount of time you've given us here today, but it's a fascinating story to me. But I just want to touch on something really quickly. When you first were going to design this system, your intent was to lease it out to the Kiewits of the world, which I want to point out, the Kiewits of the world are very unique because they're a self-performing general contractor, which is unique. They perform most of their work. So when you've got a regular general, they're not doing all of the work, but they're sure as hell going to want your system still, because they want to know where all those utilities are underground, because they're responsible. So if they, as a general, want to mandate on that job that every subcontractor that is going to be digging in the ground has to use your system, they can do that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a good example. I mean, Kiewit self-insures, so they're like their own insurance agency. And that's why they're implementing our solution, because we significantly reduce the risk and liability. So that's a good example. And I think that insurance companies will take a look at that model and insist that their clients use our solution. And as soon as it happens with one insurance company, then it'll have to happen with all of them. I mean,
At some point, you would think. So
yeah.
Let's just, a lot of assumptions here. And for maybe a lot of people, it'll be a matter of, does the software actually do what he claims it says it does? And that will be learned over time, but I can share that, I personally have had a very close friend that's been in the construction industry that has gone through the whole demo, and he's not a very excitable guy. However, he does not like to talk on the phone, but we actually wound up talking for about 3 hours after the demo presentation because he was so excited about what your software does. And it's actually, according to him, far better than he could have thought. And his whole thing in the very beginning was, if it can do what it says it does, it is the holy grail to the construction industry. So the point I wanted to get to, though, is you were going to sell this system or lease this system for 150 grand a year, but what put you on a different path?
Well, so when I brought Kiewit on board and CDOT on board, my retail price was $150,000 per year. Now, keep in mind, as I mentioned, I was operating off the old platform, which is what other companies are operating off of, old cloud and mobile platforms. Okay. Normally what happens is you buy the enterprise solution, and then it comes with mobile application extensions. That's generally how it works in the world. You buy the enterprise system, then it comes with mobile extensions. And by the way, normally the way that you've developed your cloud and the way that you develop your mobile application are separate. Two separate pieces of code. Even though they work together, they're separated. When I brought Vasa in, I had a vision that in my mind, would make us $1 billion company. Okay. And while he was redeveloping the platform, I said to him, I got an idea, but I've been told this can't be done. And I've been told it can't be done for several years.
Seems to be a common theme with you, Paige.
Well, I'm a disruptor. I like it. My parents will tell you I was a disruptor since I was 2, right? Fortunately, I stopped driving my parents nuts and I applied it to technology and the automotive and the construction industry. So, and disruption, by the way, as a technologist, is a good thing now. So I don't feel so bad saying I'm a disruptor, but I had lots of practice from when I was a child up to when I was even early adult. But I've refocused that. Okay, but all humor aside, what I said to Vasa was, listen, 2 things. Number one, $150,000 a year system doesn't sound like a lot of money to $1 billion company, but they know that they're going to be investing in it for probably 10 to 20 years because we become part of their workflow processes. And remember I mentioned they haven't changed their business practices for 25 or 30 years. That means that once your solution's in there, they're probably not going to change it for 25 to 30 years because it's just too much change, right? So once you're in, you're in. So you got to talk to accounting, probably procurement, somebody in IT, maybe somebody in their GIS division or CAD division, somebody at the C level. It's a long sales cycle. As a matter of fact, our average sales cycle on these big clients we were going after at the enterprise level was a year, 1 year sales cycle. Well, you can't sustain that. I mean, that's just a long sales cycle. Eventually, we got it down to about 6 months because we were starting to get more visibility and credibility. But when I brought Voss in and he's redeveloping the whole platform, I said, here's my vision. He goes, what is it? Today, you buy an enterprise platform and it comes with a mobile app, right? He goes, yeah. I said, I want to build a mobile app that comes with the enterprise. He's like, what do you mean? Like, someone could buy one mobile app and it'll run their entire operations and they can integrate into their systems of record. They can integrate into the Internet of Things. So they have all access to all the information that's out there throughout the world on one mobile app. He goes, that's never been done before. I go, I know, but you're telling me we're moving on to the most modern platform in the world. Just take a look and see if we can do it. And the way I always look at it is, listen, if a dummy like me can think it, It's because I've seen all the pieces of the puzzle. And so I think it can be done. And I see through the complexity. But anyways, needless to say, he came back about 30 days later and said, we can do it. We can do it while we're developing the system out. And I said, do you realize what this will do? I said, it's not that we can sell it so cheap and it will significantly reduce the sales cycle, because just so you know, we sell that app today for $2,495 a year. Okay. So what that does for us is two things. Like I've got large clients, billion-dollar companies that I can say, why don't you just start out with 4 apps and put it on one project? For under $10,000, you can test the solution out that Kiewit already uses it. CDOT mandated it. I've got multiple engineering surveying firms using it now. The equipment manufacturers have partnered with me, and $10,000 is nothing to them. And they'll try it. So it's such an easier sale. And then that's on one project. And then as they move it out to multiple projects, it's called land and expand in sales and marketing terms. Get in there and then start to expand. Okay. And I don't even have to sell them. The clients call us up and say, hey, we need 5 more apps. Well, guess what? We've automated the system. You go online, stick your credit card in there, and download the 5 apps. You don't even have to call us. I don't even have to have a resource that's even talking to them through the way that we've automated the system. But here's the ticket. This is what I'm excited about.
Okay.
It's the 80-20 rule. Okay. My guess is that 80% of construction companies, engineering and surveying firms, excavating companies, municipalities, utilities, pipeline companies around the world are so small. These are, I call them ma and pa shops. They might have 5 to 10 people, either working within the city organization that manages everything, or construction companies that's family owned. You know, the uncle works there, the brother works there, mom does the accounting. You know, there might be, you know, a handful of people. They can't afford an enterprise system like we've developed. So when you think about it, that's the market I want to go after. I want to go after the 80% of the market that normally these type of technologies are reserved for the big companies. It's a clean slate. Now, if I'm correct, and I don't like to use percentages of total addressable market, but if we could capture 1% of all the municipalities, universities, construction companies, engineering surveying firms, utility companies, pipeline companies around the world that are still managing their data on paper systems, we're a multi-billion-dollar company.
Well, let's be clear here. You're not doing an either or thing, because you're still going to get the Kiewits of the world.
Absolutely.
But what you've done really is you've made it so that the small mom and pop guy actually has a full enterprise solution at his fingertips with one mobile app, which means that as that company grows, and probably because of you helping with your software, right, making them more efficient, as they grow, they're going to add more mobile apps.
That's exactly right. That's why I say land and expand. You get in there. Like, I'll give you an example. We recently just brought on 2 municipalities.
Okay.
Okay. One in Iowa. And we said, how many users do you have? And they said, well, we probably only have half a dozen users at most. This is the way we are. So why don't you just start out with 2? It's under $5,000 a year. They're like, you're kidding me. It's like, no. They'll start out with 2, and eventually they'll see so much value. They'll call, hey, we need another app. We need another app. We can just go online and download it, and we get paid. Okay. But I'm also working with large engineering surveying firms that will start out with 10 on one project. But at any given time, they could have 20, 30, 40 projects going. I mean, they could go from 10 apps to 200 or 300 quickly. The big companies. Okay. But where I think our real value is, and I mentioned this earlier, is the municipal market, because municipalities, they need to know where their assets are, both above ground and below ground, especially water systems and their sewage systems. Okay. Now, again, a vast majority of them are going to be using paper systems. I'll give you an example of how big this market is just in the United States. There's over 20,000, excuse me, there's over 38,000 small municipalities with a population under 20,000. Why did I pick that number? Because the municipality in Iowa that called us, brought on board, and recently the one in New Jersey, they both have a population around 18,000. So I thought to myself, okay, this is the model. 38,000 small municipalities in the United States, a vast majority of them are still going to be using paper systems. They're all going to want to migrate over onto a digital system because it's obviously such a significant improvement on the way they're managing their assets, but normally it would be cost prohibitive. That's why somebody said, well, how come they haven't done it to this point? Because our competitors would run anywhere between about $150,000 to $250,000 a year. In fact, our competitors that either have a CAD system that they provide or a GIS system, they take a 4-year college education to understand how to operate them. Our system is intuitive and easy to use, and we can have anyone up and running and trained on it in a couple of hours, and then they're good to go. And again, that's why I use this word disruption. Now, 38,000 municipalities with a population under 20,000. I think might take time, might take 3, 4, 5, 6 years. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I think I can realize 10% of that market. Honestly, there's no reason why we wouldn't get 80, 90, 100% of it, because you cannot touch a system like ours at the price point that we have. Now, you could do the math on that. If they were just paying us, I don't know, $10,000 a year each. In other words, they had like 4 users, $10,000 a year each. And we were able to get 3,800 of them. I mean, that right there is $38 million a year revenue at over 80% profit margin. And keep in mind, based on economies of scale, is that as our client base increases and the more capacity that we require in the cloud, our pricing actually comes down and our profit margins go up. That's the beautiful thing about selling a software app that's basically a mobile application. In terms of other industries, I'm going to give you an example. Take a look at Uber, okay? Uber is based on a mobile app that utilizes a map and GPS. That's it. Behind that, they built in a bunch of workflow processes and business practices that turns them and their clients, if you will, into a transportation company that is absolutely decimating the taxi industry. Okay? Like just destroying it. Why? It's a better service. It's easier. I have more control over it. I know where the car is, when it's going to show up. The driver can be rated. I can provide discount. I mean, you know what it's done to transportation. Okay? Let's take a look at Airbnb. That's a mobile app, uses GPS overlaid on top of a map. And then Airbnb built their own workflow processes and business practices inside that, which now has created a serious issue for the hospitality industry. 2 things about that are important. Number one, our app is a simple mobile app that utilizes map and GPS. And then we've built all of our own proprietary workflow practices and business processes into that. What we have done is built the Uber app of the critical infrastructure industry. And the second thing I wanted to bring up, where I said there's 2 components to that. People might ask, well, how come Trimble didn't develop this solution? Or how come Esri didn't develop this
But
solution?
you already indicated they tried.
Well, yeah, but on top of that, think about this. I'm going to ask you a question. How come Marriott didn't develop Airbnb? Why didn't Yellow Cab?
They don't want to kill their own business.
You nailed it. You nailed it. Like, not only like Trimble and Esri, number one, they're operating off in some cases, antiquated technologies and operating platforms. Plus, they have so many systems that have been integrated into one system that it's hard to separate them. Okay. And even they do their job and they do it well and they provide a great service. They have distribution networks, they have resellers. So they have this huge network that they have to feed. A lot of mouths are involved in the sales and revenue pipeline. Okay. We come along, everything's automated. I don't have resellers. I don't have a whole distribution and business partners and all that that's selling our software. You just go online and buy it. You can't touch our pricing. And it's never the companies that are well entrenched in the industry that create a new technology that's disruptive.
For example, Blockbuster, for example, Kodak, Fuji, right?
You could go on and on.
Right.
I'll give you an example.
No, Paige, you know what? Here, you've
Go
been
ahead.
so gracious for your time. We are literally we're 2 hours in. Okay. So here's the thing. I want to briefly touch on the stock. I want to touch. I think you've indicated you've got something coming up in November here that could be pretty significant for the company, right?
Oh yeah, I think I know what you're talking about as far as just, creating more visibility in the market about our solution.
Correct.
Yeah, so we're going to be broadcasted. I think it's going to be in November. Actually, I just got the first cut that we went through last week, but it'll be 3 weeks ago tomorrow. We had film crews in here, and they're shooting a special on Prostar that'll be broadcasted on PBS. Should be sometime early part, maybe mid part of November. It's going to be broadcasted into 84 million homes and 50 countries around the world. And basically what it is we caught their attention because, people don't realize the critical infrastructure that's buried below the ground and how big it is, how vast that network is, and how critical it is, not just to the public and the environment, but our economy. I mean, you think about everything that's buried below the ground, right? It's internet, the gas that warms our homes, the systems that, dispose our sewage and provide our drinking water. And it's not just an issue in the United States. It's kind of on the forefront of their mind because of the infrastructure bill. And as you mentioned, like what was happening in Flint, Michigan, a lot of our water systems are old systems that lead was utilized to create the materials and the metals, and it's poisoning us. It's poisoning, our kids. This is a problem throughout the United States. But the issue that we have here, as big as it is, and pales in comparison to other countries where, their countries are much older than the United States, and so is their infrastructure. So what PBS does is they like to have stories that are very high level interest to the public based on two things. Either does it address a public issue or does it address an environmental issue? Well, guess what?
It addresses both.
We check both boxes. So they're doing a story on how big the problem is, number one. Number two, they interviewed Kramer, which is one of the large national infrastructure construction companies that adopted our software. They interviewed the company that was a contractor working with Kiewit that was utilizing our software on a project. And then they interviewed CDOT, who obviously mandated our software. And then they talked to me. And the goal is to let people know we've got a big problem in the United States. It's a global problem. It's a concern for our public and the environment. And there's a small little company out there that developed a solution that can address this problem, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. And I think, no pun intended, that's going to put us on the map.
Well, that is pretty good there. Let's talk about it for a minute. This is your chart. I have your chart up on the screen. Now, when did you guys actually go up? When did you move to this is an OTC stock. So when did you move up to the OTC?
Well, no, just so you know, I think it's important for people to know that we just went public this year and we started out on the Toronto Stock Exchange Venture.
Okay.
We just went public on January 11th. So, about 9 months ago.
Okay, you're 9 months in,
9 months in, and then
and currently US, you're sitting at 32 cents a share.
which interestingly enough is exactly what we did our listing at. That's the price, 40 cents Canadian, which is about 32 cents US. And oddly enough, I kind of laugh at that because I think to myself, if you take a look at everything that we've accomplished over the last 9 months, I would argue it's greater than what we did in the previous 5 years. And yet our share price is still where it was when we initially went public. Now I get it. There's a couple
Now,
reasons.
you and I have had this discussion, right? So the small cap, micro cap space has been getting pounded for the last really 3-4 months. So it is not a company specific thing. It's a sector thing, right? And here's the reality of it, Paige. You have a relatively new unknown company that trades very, very thin volume.
Yeah.
And I don't think that people really understand. Most people are not going to understand the magnitude unless they have a construction background. Then I think if you got a construction background, you're going to get this right away. Listen, I don't want to take any more of your time because it's just been a wealth of knowledge. I think anybody that has been listening to this is going to understand that there is a very big need. My question to you is this: how many shares are there total outstanding?
Yeah. We have a total of 91 million shares outstanding today. All of our shares are common shares, and we have 117 million when fully diluted. And what I mean by fully diluted is we have warrants out there, which are actually kind of like a secondary built-in financing, and we have about $13 million in additional financing that's available through those warrants that will expire January 11th of 2023. And we actually have what's known as a shotgun clause on them. So if our share price gets up to $1.20 and is trading there for 10 days consecutively, then I can make a call on those warrants.
Okay. How are you for financing right now?
Yeah, so just coming back, one thing that I want your audience to know is I'm a little different than most CEOs. I'm very transparent. This is my first time running a publicly traded company, and I'm trying to instill kind of a new way of doing things, and that is just lay it on the line. Just tell people what they need to know, even if it's something that maybe you think you don't want them to know. Be transparent. I've always operated that way. So I think the reason our share price is where it is for two reasons. As you mentioned, you're right. The market has been under serious duress since probably about March, the microcap market. It's a well-known fact, and of course, we get caught up in it as well. That's number one. But I don't like to make excuses. The other thing, and it's coming back on the question as far as how are we on financing on our funds, is that if you just go online and you take a look at where we are, we're probably going to do, a million, maybe $1.1 million in revenue this year in terms of US dollars. Okay. Well, then you take a look at what our burn rate is and how much money we're losing. It's like, well, number one, it doesn't look like, on the surface, again, no pun intended, you guys are gaining a bunch of traction. And number two, you've got a pretty significant burn. Okay. Well, two things. Number one, I had basically only a handful of clients in the first 5 years of operations, including in 2020. I couldn't bring on more clients until April. And since then, I brought on 8 more new clients. Okay.
Okay.
Now, I think in the fourth quarter, I might be able to double that. So we're starting to see that ramp up, but the market doesn't know that until I do that.
Until look, you can talk, but until it's proven.
That's it. Proof in the pudding, but it's coming because
Okay.
my sales cycle is bigger than it's ever been. Companies are calling me, municipalities are calling me. I'm even doing some testing in other countries, just so you know, including Australia. So we're starting to expand. We're starting to see that adoption in the market. Okay. I have about $1 million of, I call it runway. Okay. That $1 million will last us till the end of the year. Okay. Which means
Okay.
I need to go out and do a financing, which I think that's one of the reasons we're having this conversation. I plan on doing a financing. On my end, what sucks is I hate to do a financing when I know what we've executed on. I know what's in our sales pipeline. I know what's happening around here, but we're caught up, as you mentioned, in kind of the micro cap duress as far as this pricing. Great opportunity for investors to invest at the same share price that I did my IPO at, and the fact that I'm going to raise enough money to have enough runway for 2 years and to get us to cash flow positive. And if we were going to end on something, I think that's maybe the most important milestone that I now have my sights on. And for the first time, a roadmap. Okay. So because we've been operating 9 months as a publicly traded company, I know what my filing fee costs are. I know what my promotion costs are, sales and marketing, my development costs. I know all of our operational costs. Okay.
Yep.
So what I can do now, and I now know how much I can charge for my app. Okay. And I'm able to identify that if we can sell 1,200 apps of Pointman Pro, I'll be cash flow positive. And I actually put together a whole roadmap on how we're going to get there. How
All
many?
right, Paige, hold on. Hold on.
Yep.
I don't want to go into all of that because here's the deal.
Yep.
You're going to do a financing.
Yep.
And that is probably what the overhead is on the stock. That doesn't help because, nobody knows where that might price, how big it might be, what other attachments there might be.
Yep.
Don't know what the other attachments might be. So that I guess the market will find out in the near future. But there is a capital raise, it sounds like, on the table, right? But I'll tell you right now, as I look at this, and look, everybody needs to know that this is not investment advice, and I am not, anything that is shared with you here today is purely my opinion. It's educational. It is not investment advice in any way, shape, or form. However, I look at this as a opportunity from everything that we've just discussed as ridiculously cheap. That's my take, and everybody else can view it how they want to view it. But I think the opportunity, if we look at the total addressable market of this opportunity, and you said earlier it was $10 billion a year just in locating utilities, right? That's what you said.
So, I mean, that's exactly right.
That's just in the United States. So we're clear.
That's correct.
That's not the United States, Canada, and Australia.
No, and just to let you know, every country, the way they locate utilities and pipelines is very similar to the way that we do it, and they put paint marks down. I mean, that's just throughout the world.
So that's I think, look, I don't think there's many opportunities in the market where you could come across a company, and I'm just going to sum it up like this, where you have pioneering patents, which I didn't even know what those were prior to meeting you. You have basically a system that you wrote up before the technology existed, mobile phones, Bluetooth, GPS, right? All of this stuff. You had Trimble Navigation, which is one of the largest GPS geospatial companies in the world, open up their equipment for you. You have a $1 trillion infrastructure package that is going to be approved at some point. You have a state which has made it law for your product to be used. I mean, call me silly, but these things line up as I would think potentially significant catalysts. So really what all it comes down to now is execution, which is go out there and sell your product, right?
That's it. That's the most important thing on a company's life cycle as far as early stage companies, in particular technology companies, is when do you get where you're just selling your solution? That's where we are. We don't need to do any more R&D. I don't need to do any more testing. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. We're going into sales and marketing mode, and we're going to do it two ways. Okay. We're going to do it organically, which means I'm going to have our salespeople calling on clients in the municipal market and engineering surveying firms and construction companies and other state DOTs, which we're already doing. I mean, they're in our sales pipeline. Okay.
Okay.
But, and that's what my 5-year projections are based off. We're going to do this ourselves. We're going to sign, small companies. They're probably going to buy on average 10 apps. We start to do the math. But what I think is going to happen, and by the way, we're starting to see signs of it already, is that we're going to introduce a disruptive technology in the market. And when it's disruptive, people start calling you. You don't have to call them. And it's happening already. Well, if that's the case, and that happens in each one of the market sectors that we're focusing on, then it's going to blow my projections out of the water. And we're going to see what most people don't like to see initially, hockey stick trajectory, right? It's not 100% year over year increase in sales. You might have 1,000%, 2,000, 3,000% increase in sales because everyone has to have it. And the way that we've priced it, everyone can afford it. That's the difference now. Everyone.
Well, we're not making any predictions here today.
No predictions.
We're not making any predictions.
Nope.
Is there the possibility that could happen? I would say, yeah, that there is a good possibility that could happen. But again, it comes down to proof is in the pudding. That's the way I've always viewed things. And I just want to say this, Paige. I meet a lot of CEOs, and the transparency that you just spoke of, I think is tremendous. I think is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I think that your story, I think that the way that you have gone about this whole thing has been very strategic. I think that you're doing it the right way. I mean, even going back and rebuilding the entire software. A lot of people would have been told, hey, this thing could collapse on you in 3 years. You know what? After putting out a bunch of money, a bunch of time, they would have said, so what? We got to move forward because I need to start making some money, right? That is not the path you took. Everything you have taken, everything you have done is very strategic, very smart. Who sits down and thinks about a product and writing up a patent before a mobile smartphone even exists? I don't know, but very impressive across the board. I think that if anybody has any more questions, I think at the very least, they should go and start following your story. Go sign up for your investor alerts that you do have on your website and start following the story, because I believe this is going to be a very big story in a couple of years. So that's where I'm at with this. I want to thank you so much for your time on a Sunday, sharing your story. And if anybody else has more that they would like to find out, I'm sure you'd be open to them reaching out to you, right?
Absolutely. And, on a closing note, this is what I tell. I mean, I meet with a lot of brokers and hedge funds and, a lot of investment banks. And by the way, we got a lot of eyes on us right now. And you just said it, we're at the point now, the proof is in the pudding. No excuses. Can you execute? And this is what I always close on when I'm talking to a group. Okay. And it's the confidence that I want to instill in them based on the confidence that I have, which is put us on your radar. Keep an eye on us over the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and watch what we're doing, okay? Because we are on the move, and you'll see that in our press releases, not fluffy press releases. It's going to be based on client acquisition in multiple markets. And that's what people want to see. Is the market adopting your software, and at what rate, and how big is that market? So keep an eye on us, because I'm telling you, over the next even just 30 days, you're going to start to see a serious ramp up in client acquisition, and not only in the United States, but in other parts of the world.
Paige, I love this. I love this interview. I thank you for your time. I wish you nothing but the best of success. And hopefully we can have you back on Alpha Wolf later, maybe in a year, maybe 6 months. I don't know. And get a little update from you.
I would love that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's people like yourself and also your viewers that are going to be critical to our success. So I don't mind allocating, as much time as needed on any day. So I really appreciate it and hope you enjoy the balance of your Sunday and have a great week.
I appreciate it, Paige. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.